after my 16th birthday, we rear-ended a car with the words "Justice for Girls" sprawled on the windshield. The suburb became animated as men and women peacefully protested the rape of a girl half my age. As they cried for change, I sat in my car, muted from reality. I was witness to a powerful call for change in my country, impacted by the nature of my gender, but I wasn't a participant. Growing up in a city of extremes, I always thought I knew the truths of life. When I peered from car windows at the vast slums lining mansions, I knew that my education is a luxury millions of my peers cannot access. I know that security is rare. There are many unsafe in the city I call home. I also learned that women are convenient scapegoats, at risk for exercising the rights that make them human. In this way, I became aware of the culture of rape and abuse that seems intrinsic to this society. Yet even this felt comfortably removed from my immediate reality. It was as though I was not really living there, not truly engaged in the world around me. When I was 16, I was selected to work on the Sexual Assault Forensics Bill, a proposed legislation and petition of public interest for the Law Ministry of India and Prime Minister's Office that seeks to better the legal treatment of rape victims. A large portion of my role involved evaluating legal loopholes in the Indian Criminal Code and case studies where rapists remained unconvicted despite overwhelming evidence. But my research demanded more than blanket statistics. It asked me to look into first-hand accounts, individual witnesses, and speeches. I read about strangled screams and bruised necks, unwelcome hands on bodies that were not very different from my own. I realized that I was completely detached from the reality around me. I know that rape exists. I knew that rape culture was important, but somehow I hadn't processed the extent of suffering that millions of girls undergo throughout their lives. Somehow, in the smoke clouds of paranoia, everything I thought I knew became uncertain. Every truth I knew, every idea about this society, curved into a piercing question mark. My worldview was incomplete. My mind turned into this carousel of intellectual anarchy, and I wondered, was I truly aware of the world around me? Did I really know what happened outside of my school, outside of my home? I realized that I had detached myself from the reality of human suffering, believing there's always a war somewhere in the world, genocide never ends, the use of women and girls half my age as animals who are blamed for being raped was an inevitable part of the fabric of life. As I began speaking with more people, I realized that I was not the only one desensitized to the rape culture right under my nose. Why do we ignore the very real experiences of others just because we don't feel the same way? Just because we haven't shared the same agony? In our world, rape is talked about in whispers, almost as if it was an embarrassment and not a tragedy. Rape victims resist reporting their crimes in fear of stigmas. Rapists remain unconvicted, and we remain unmoved at the injustice in our own surroundings. With newspaper and social media right at our fingertips, the average person today is more aware of rapes in our country and outside than they were in the past. But as the amount of rape-related headlines increases, our understanding of shock and issue decreases. We've begun to treat rape sort of like a constant amidst dated attitudes that we assume will never change. I think it's human tendency to feel more greatly for issues that personally impact us rather than those that don't. But today, our empathy comes with limitations. So what does it take to change rape culture? What does it take to erect new information, rewire our brains, unlearn our fundamental truths? And in this way, can we unlearn fear, inequality, hatred? In my view, the first step is a conversation. After working with these policymakers, I volunteered at a shelter that houses minors who've been rescued from brothels and sex trafficking rings. I was continually inspired by their strength, their persistence, and their hope. In our conversations, we always found common ground. We shared a cerebral outlook on life and emotional understanding, even though our experiences were more than a mile apart. Here I met Ahina. At age 16, she lost her arm fleeing a house of sexual abuse. In her community, the birth of a daughter is celebrated because they perceive her life as an addition to their income. Starting age 10, every daughter born in that household and in that community is forced into prostitution, seen as an addition to a very lucrative sex trade. Her life is diminished merely to sex and to the cash that she has to bring back to her parents. Her entire life, Ahina dreamed of being a pilot. But today, she fears returning to a community where she is defined by her gender and her fertility. Her worth is stripped to sex, and her friends and family dismiss her trauma as an everyday occurrence. Together, we decided that our world is a labyrinth of changing walls. For some, perimeters expand, while for others, they cave in. For some, being pressed against these walls motivates us to defeat that external force. But more often than not, we have to submit to the circumstances that have been handed to us. As I engaged in this kind of dialogue, I realized that my understanding of rape was not concrete. Rape was no longer this abstract concept I read about in the news, something that would never affect me, something that I couldn't even think of. Rather, it was a brutal crime that affects a dangerously large portion of our society, a reflection of a world that teaches boys that they are more important than the girls around them. The idea that a woman must be tied to the kitchen and she's not worth dignity or self-respect. Ahina opened my eyes to the ideas of justice and privilege. I decided I would not evade knowledge of our vulnerability, not hide from the reality of human suffering. Instead, I would embrace the empathy, the guilt, and the fear, taking every opportunity I could to be an agent of change in my own small means. In this way, I met Aliyah. At age 11, Aliyah was rescued under POSCO and put into this home after being repeatedly raped by members of her family. Her entire life, she wanted to be a doctor. She wanted to be educated. However, today, she has turned to a life of self-harm. At every reminder of the experiences that she had to undergo, the thought of returning to her family, she turns to slashing her wrists because she believes that that pain is less. When I spoke to her, something that especially surprised me was that she did not even know she was a victim. She was unaware of the laws that were in place for girls like her, this prevention of sexual assault against minors. She believed that her experiences and her trauma were a result of the family she was born in and the gender she was given, and the gender she had. This was especially true because all women in her community, girls, infants, elders included, were either disrespected or subject to the same rape that she was. She didn't realize that this was wrong. I think when we talk about changing rape culture, one of the most important factors is understanding and being aware of the laws that exist in our country and outside. There are many laws put in place, ordinances by prime ministers and governments of huge countries. However, within rural areas, within our own households, there's a general unawareness of the idea that rape is wrong. In my journey to understand what it takes to diffuse rape culture, I also began research at the University of Santa Barbara, California. I looked into the weaponization of rape in ethnic conflict zones. And in this as well, I started to look at personal stories. I realized that rape is not an issue that is unique to 2019. Most of this began in World War I, where women were treated as spoils of war for men to celebrate with. In Bosnia, girls aged 10 were impregnated because of their ethnicity, and women at the age of 80 were raped for the symbolism of territorial gains. Today, rape culture exists in the fact that most girls within this room would not be able to walk on the road without fearing their safety. The fact that a lot of us are at risk within our households and outside. Rape is something that did not start today, but it's also something that is not in the past. And when we talk about rape culture, it's important to recognize the magnanimity of the issue and understand that this is something which can impact someone standing in the audience wing, someone in the audience, someone on the street. In this way, I met Joka. Joka was a 26-year-old graduate student and daughter of Yemeni immigrants. Living in the United States, she had faced the rape culture at multiple ends. But she struggled with the idea that, the assumption that rape culture begins with women. A lot of the times we focus on preventing rape rather than eliminating the factors which contribute to it and cause it. The fact that girls are not allowed to step out of the house without a jacket. The fact that all of us have been trained not to step into the elevator with an unknown man. The idea that victims are blamed because of what they were wearing or what they were drinking. Instead, let's begin with the boys that are told they are more important than their sisters. The families and households that treat women with disrespect or as kitchen appliances that do not deserve respect or control over their own bodies. Let's talk about the factors, the ideas, the opinions that eventually surface into rape culture, rape, and rapists. I believe strongly that rape culture can be changed through active dialogue because sympathy is very short-lived. Empathy is the precursor to effective change. In order to connect with someone else's feelings, we must first connect with our own, and for that we have to accept our vulnerability. Maybe one day we can create our own evolution and be part of a world where Ahina is a pilot, Aliyah is a doctor, and Joka feels safe. Thank you.